Cool, thank you for joining us, guys. Once again, we're going to be bringing you the latest and the greatest of everything that's happening in and around your world of business when it comes to Africa. Today we have Girnun, the CEO of Merchant Capital, and we're going to be walking through a bit of his journey and hearing a bit of insights from him. Thank you for joining us, and I really appreciate your time. So,
sure.
Just a little bit of who you are. A lot of people don't know. You come from South Africa and you spent some time abroad. You just want to walk us through that a little bit briefly?
Yeah, sure. So, born and bred in South Africa, proudly South African, notwithstanding the challenges that our country is facing at the moment. I'm still here and still cautiously optimistic around the opportunities that this great country has. So yeah, as you said, spent most of my life in Johannesburg. Spent about 5 or 6 years living in London, working in the city straight out of university. And although it was really good fun and I learned a lot and met some incredible people, I always had this burning desire to come back to South Africa. And in retrospect, it was the best decision that I ever made. So I'm really pleased that I didn't end up spending the rest of my time in the UK.
For sure. I mean, let's start with you were at Wits, right?
Yes.
What did you study there?
I did a BCom, so that was a 3-year undergraduate, and then I did an honours degree in finance and economics. I did, yes.
Brainiac.
Yeah, I was actually a pretty lazy academic at school. I was into sports and partying and girls and everything else that was important to me at the time.
Yeah.
And I guess in kind of at the end of matric, at grade 12, I really just realized that I needed to apply myself and I couldn't just be an average student if I really wanted to achieve. So for kind of final year exams, I really worked hard and did well. And it just proved to myself that if I applied myself and just wasn't lazy, then I could kind of do okay. And I think it was a similar concept at university. You know, I was never the most diligent scholar, but when it came to exams and prep, then I took it seriously and landed up doing really well.
Yeah, I mean, you sound very relaxed and lazy, and I feel like it's so unfair for everyone else that works so hard. He's like, yeah, I did okay, and a decade later you got Merchant Capital. But it's just insane. So you left Wits and then you went directly to the UK?
Yeah, so the plan was, I guess, like many 21-year-olds, you know, kind of had no idea what I wanted to do.
Sure.
Wanted some life experience. Didn't really just want to get a job and just, you know, start my kind of adult life. And was planning on being in London for 6 months, earning some pounds, and then traveling around Europe for 6 months, and then coming back. And 6 months turned into 6 years. And it was interesting. It was a real, it was a life-changing journey for me being in London because, and I tell this often, you know, when I speak to kind of young entrepreneurs and they're saying, you know, what should I do after school? And I'm like, if you've got the opportunity, get out of South Africa. Just go and travel and see the world, because I think we all live in a little bubble here in South Africa, and certainly in my upbringing, you know, I kind of left Joburg as a proverbial big fish in a little sea. I arrived in London and I was this tiny little tadpole in this massive ocean, right? I knew nobody. I didn't have any contacts. I hadn't, you know, it wasn't like my father said, he has a credit card. I had no money. I had to basically, you know, start from the bottom and build myself up. And I think London, of all places, it's very competitive. You know, academics is really important there. People are networked. There's lots of wealth. There's lots of connections, etc. So I literally was humbled, completely humbled, and had to start, you know, from the bottom. And I think as a life lesson, that was a hugely humbling experience, and I think it's created a lot of the humility that I have today, is that, you know, you kind of thrown into this massive ocean and it's sink or swim. And for me, that was a really great experience about being in London. And I think also just the independence, you know, having to go in independence, you know, at the age of 21, having to wash and clean and cook and do all of that myself, which obviously I hadn't done, you know, had a relatively privileged upbringing here in South Africa. So I think that taught me a lot of life skills. And then I guess lastly, you know, London is just such a cosmopolitan city. So there's people from all over the world. In fact, all the friends that I made weren't British. You know, they were from wherever, South America, Europe, Australia. So I think you create an EQ, an ability to relate to different people and really connect with diverse cultures and different people, which in my mind is one of the best life skills that you can learn. You can't learn that at any university.
For sure, I agree. I want to come back to the EQ point, right?
Sure.
But you touched on education, and I think that's really important, especially in terms of upskilling from an entrepreneur point of view. I'm sure you yourself are still learning today, right? Because the landscape's always shifting.
Yeah.
You get a cum laude at Wits, and then you see Stanford and Harvard on your CV as well. Was that an important decision in terms of kind of trying to balance yourself in this new big water tadpole situation?
Yeah, I think it's a theory that I've always lived by, which is like constantly growing and constantly learning and never thinking that I know everything. You know, I know you're into sports, so I'm going to use golf as an analogy, right? The thing with golf is that as soon as you think you've got the game, it comes to bite you. And it just kind of levels you, right? And I think there are a lot of sports like that. So I think entrepreneurship is exactly the same. If you get to a place where you're complacent and you think, well, I can't, no one can teach me anything, or I can't learn anything more on the top of my game, that's when you actually it will come and bite you. So I've always had this kind of personal philosophy and principle of wanting to just grow and learn and constantly be challenged, learn from other people, hear diverse views, etc. And I kind of set my targets high. You know, I thought, why should a South African not be able to go to Stanford and Harvard? So I really was ambitious in that kind of thinking, and then I made it happen.
For sure. A lot of people say South Africans, I mean, you're well traveled, and maybe you could verify this for us, but South Africans seem to have a little bit more edge than the rest of the world when it comes to business. Is that true?
I certainly think that, I think there's a problem in South African entrepreneurs. We actually underestimate ourselves on a global scale, which is wrong. You know, so I'm privileged enough to be doing a program at Harvard Business School, and it's a 3-year program where you go to campus every year for 4 weeks for 3 years. And there's 148 of us, and we all are founders of businesses and entrepreneurs from around the world. So, big contingent from kind of India, Latin America, the US. There's 5 people from Africa. I'm one of the South Africans. And what I've realized is that they are hugely successful entrepreneurs, but by no ways do I feel kind of at the bottom of the talent pool. You know, and I think that is kind of reaffirmed on a big global scale, like in being at Harvard Business School, that South African entrepreneurs do underestimate ourselves, and we shouldn't. Sure. You know, I feel quite strongly about that. The second thing is that I think being an entrepreneur in South Africa, you have to deal with a lot of things that typical entrepreneurs around the world wouldn't have to deal with. You know, you need to be so broadly talented and skilled because there is curveballs that are thrown at us every day that, you know, I guess in other emerging markets may be similar, that you wouldn't typically find if you were in London or New York or Sydney, right? So I think your skill set as an entrepreneur is a lot more well-rounded. We're not scared of hard work. We find opportunities in the chaos. And I think those are all entrepreneurial skills that really set South African entrepreneurs apart when they go global.
I see. Interesting. I read somewhere that there is that discommunication or that imbalance where you go abroad and like you're expected to be an expert in one thing and not necessarily as broad as South African would be.
Yes.
And that is obviously, I'm getting that to be true from what you said.
That's exactly right.
Because my father went to Paris and he was an exec this side. He goes that side and he's trying to do everything, and they're like, no. This guy does one thing, then you got to send it to the next department to do the other thing. And I guess that comes from us and, like you say, the environment of being in South Africa. And moving on to more of like the EQ you said, right? Emotional intelligence, understanding people, working with people. You seem like a big people person, very optimistic in terms of how people are, right?
Yes.
But that goes against your guys' business model in a way.
Why?
Or I'm picking, not necessarily, because from my understanding, right, is, and I'll bring it back. My understanding is that as a person that's now trying to build a business, right? How do I engage with someone who's super analytical? I mean, you've got your golf dunks on, right? And I'm just like, this guy's supposed to be someone who ran a business for 10 decades. How do you work with people in a manner that kind of helps them grow and become a better person from an emotional point of view? I don't know if I'm on.
No, so I think I've got you. Let me try. So I believe that EQ is, in my mind, more important than IQ. I think you need to have an element of IQ naturally. But if you think about business, is people doing business with people. That's what business is at the end of the day. Yes, there's all this AI and stuff that's going on, but at the end of the day, a person needs to kind of take what they're getting out of the AI and utilize it, right? So there's still people element to it. So, in my mind, the EQ is what's really important, and also having a good mix in your business is important. So we have people in our business whose IQs are through the roof, and they have a certain role, and their role is to be super analytical and look at the data and build the financial models and all the stuff that you've just mentioned. That's not me. So I am someone who have always been interested in maths and numbers and and like with numerical, I'm good, but that's not what I actually leverage. I rather leverage my people skills. And I think, successful businesses, successful teams have the ability to have both. But I always say that, in my mind, Merchant Capital's real differentiator is our people. So like one could argue it's our tech, it's our funding, it's our partners, it's our credit models, it's our product. All of that is obviously you need to check the box, but it's our people. And how do we make sure that the people in the business are the real A-team? It's around really understanding and building a culture that helps grow people. And, because at the end of the day, our clients are people. They want to deal with people, right? So you can be as analytical and as objective as you want, right? And you can make the whole process completely digital and automated. But at the end of the day, people want to deal with people. And I think that has been Merchant Capital's real differentiator.
Makes sense. You were abroad, you come home. You traded abroad, or did you trade back home?
No, I worked as a trader just in London.
Okay.
And kind of figured out that it was not my calling.
Sure.
The trading was fun, and I learned about the markets, and I'll never forget, I was so excited for my parents when they came to visit me for the first time, because I've obviously got this job all by myself, and my mom arrived in my office, and I had 7 screens in front of me, and it looked like I could launch a rocket to Mars. You had Bloomberg going and numbers and people screaming and like out of a movie, right? And we went for dinner that night. And my mom said to me, like a typical mom, I'm like so proud of you, my boy. You've done this all yourself, and but you're in the wrong job.
Sure.
And I said to her, what are you talking about? I'm like, what I'm doing here, I'm making all this money. I was 21, kind of a little bit jaded at the time. And I'm like, kind of looking at the markets, and she says, it's great, but you are a people's person. You're a person that inspires people. You're a person that leads teams. You're a person that is good at networking and building relationships, and you're not doing that yet. And I remember at the time thinking, you don't know what you're talking about. I can't wait for you to go back to Joburg. But in retrospect, like typically mothers are, she was absolutely right. Because the impact that I was having was zero. So at the end of the day, you would look at your profit and loss, and it would tell you in black and white whether you made a profit or a loss. That was it. There was no further impact. You weren't engaging with anyone. You weren't changing anyone's life. So after kind of 5 years, I kind of realized that it was a little bit of a soulless profession for me. And, came back to South Africa and knew that I wanted to do stuff which impacted people, and actually there was a development piece to it.
Sure. Does that inform your move to become vice president?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so
was that at Tau?
Yeah, there was at Tau Capital. So I came back from London. I mean, I was still pretty young and green. I kind of only knew one thing at the time, and joined a very successful entrepreneur who had just started this business called Tau Capital. And at the time, his plan, which was brilliant at the time, was to he secured a coal deposit in Botswana, and he wanted to build a coal-fired power station in Botswana and export electricity to Eskom. So this was in 2007. So he kind of foresaw this massive energy crisis that it unfortunately is coming, which has come to fruition in the last few years here. And I joined him, and it was like a real entrepreneurial environment. And my role, amongst other things, was to head up business development. So go and look for new opportunities, build relationships, network with people. And I found it was really in my sweet spot, and I really enjoyed it, and kind of learned a huge amount from him as the CEO in leadership and entrepreneurship and how to build people. He has extremely high EQ, as an example.
Interesting. So I mean, you've always been in like good positions, and as you can see, like from your journey, all of these experiences have molded you into you starting, which is now a decade-old business,
yes.
Merchant Capital, and that journey must have been really exciting for you, right? I was reading about maybe a competitor. I'm not sure. You might have even financed him, but there's a device, a POS system that now kind of has a similar model to what you guys do, where I buy the device, I transact for 6 to 12 months, you guys see my track record, and then you can microfinance me. Is that what you guys do?
Yes, it is. So we don't sell the device, we partner up with the device suppliers, but it's a similar concept. And really that's what started Merchant Capital. We actually developed some technology that integrates still into the back end of the point of sale.
Sure.
So every time a customer swipes their debit or credit card, we take a fixed small percentage of that transaction, and that is kind of the way the repayment is done. So it's a pay-as-you-trade. So as long as the business is trading, they repay. If they don't trade, and I spoke about COVID earlier, then we don't collect. So that's kind of the principle behind the business model.
I see. Interesting. And I mean, you say you're a big people's person, right? There's many sectors. A lot of them largely influenced by people, others more technology. What would you say is a comfortable sector? And I know this is obviously going to throw you a little bit under the bus with some of your clients, but a comfortable sector in terms of investing. Like someone comes to you, they come from a certain background, they have a business in the sector. What makes you comfortable to have a look at that business?
So I think it would be less about, so we would be industry agnostic. So the industry is not important. I mean, there's certain things we don't do.
Sure.
So we don't do government work, we don't do religion, we don't do casinos. So like those are, and like sex, So those are the kind of three or four sectors that we don't touch. But any other sector, we would be agnostic. It's more about the business, the entrepreneur, the cash flows, etc. So we take from a credit point of view, from a risk point of view, we would look more about the ability of this business to generate cash flows and therefore grow and repay the cash advance, as opposed to is it technology or farming or wholesale or retail or food and hospitality. So we would be more industry agnostic, but more depending on looking at kind of the cash flow forecast of the business.
I see. And what would you say in terms of business in South Africa are going to be like one of the big disruptors that you can see coming?
Yeah, look, I think the obvious one is kind of this alternative energy thing at the moment, right? There's I think the two things that I see popping up the most are paddle courts and solar installation businesses. So
paddle's insane.
Yeah, paddle's gone insane and solar, right? And I actually read somewhere, it's actually on Bloomberg, I remember taking a screenshot and sending it to my team. South Africa is leading the way in alternative energy and reducing of carbon footprint. Now the reason is because we're not burning as much coal and we're using sun and alternative energy.
Sure.
So it's by default, which is great. And in the article it kind of said that every country in the world, like if you look at the UK, my brother lives in London, right? He was telling me the other day that his electricity bill has gone up 300%. So if it was £100 last year, it's now £300, right? And the reason is because energy, you've got this Ukraine crisis and all, it's just gotten so expensive. So what countries, even like the UK, being such a first world country, are going to need to do is look at alternative energy for residential. So South Africa is almost leading the way in alternative energy by default, because we haven't got a reliable kind of energy supply.
Yeah.
So I think out of that, there's going to be, it's typical South African entrepreneurship, and I love it. It's at its best, right? You just get dealt this hand, and the private sector and entrepreneurs just found a way to innovate, right? So you've got, solar, alternative energy. Everyone's talking about water being the next crisis. I'm sure there'll be some innovation around water. So I think that will be interesting. I mean, the paddle one, I'm being a little bit facetious, but it is popping up everywhere, and it's the fastest growing sport in the world.
And those models are like highly lucrative.
Exactly.
Highly lucrative.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's almost creating like community, in these little areas. So like the paddle courts that we go to, it's got a little kids area for my kids. They've got great coffee. There's a little shop, a restaurant. So it's creating businesses within something that they're leveraging of, which I think has big legs here in South Africa.
For sure. We're going to be drawing to a close soon. I've got one or two more questions. You touched on, obviously, this technology that you guys have, right? What is your take on data and like data management and the influence on data in business?
Yeah, I think it's super important, man. Like we from day one have been really deliberate about the data that we collect, because it's one thing collecting the data, it's another thing actually using that data to make decisions. So we have been predominantly a data-led business when it comes to how we operate. We obviously weren't in the beginning when we were figuring stuff out, but certainly in the last 5 years we've really become quite mature from a data perspective, and it's just a great input into decision making, right? Because there's one thing about having intuition and gut, and you need it as an entrepreneur. But if you have the privilege of backing it up with data, then those decisions are just more robust, and it also gives you a post-mortem opportunity, right? So what went wrong? And you go back and you can look at the data. And I think it's someone who has access to data and not using it is definitely missing a trick and leaving something on the table.
For sure. And I think there's a big challenge in terms of South African people understanding, or South African business owners understanding the importance of some of these things, right?
Yeah.
Like data.
Yeah.
And a little bit on a lighter note, you were dead in a Robbie Williams video. That's somewhere. How did that come about? That part of your 21
Where did you find that? Right?
Hey man, I got a good team.
There you go, well done. So that's one of like the stories I guess you would tell when someone says, tell me something about you that I wouldn't know. So it was when I just arrived in London. I hadn't got the job yet trading at the hedge fund. As I said, I didn't have money from my parents to come. If I didn't make money, I was going home, and I was quite determined to make it work. So I was looking for making money anyway, and I went to a casting agency, and they cast me in a Robbie Williams video, which sounded glamorous. It was quite glamorous, but the problem was that my role was I had to act dead, because it was a zombie video. It was one of those zombie songs, and if you remember, and there had to be dead people lying on the floor, and I was one of the dead people. But it paid. It paid my rent. Yeah, sure. Exactly.
It's good. I know you're probably not going to become a professional golfer. You love people too much. But what does the future look for, Doug? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's really focused on continuing the legacy and creating the impact of Merchant Capital. It's something that's really become so close to my heart. I just get such joy and privilege and like genuine happiness out of seeing, not only the entrepreneurs that we help, but my team, and the 85 odd people, who feel that they are making a difference. We really celebrate the wins, and it's a real performance-based culture, and it just is a great environment to be in, because there's a lot of negativity, which is understandable, but we just try, kind of the mantra is, focus on the things that you can control, and don't worry about the things that you can't control, because first of all, it's just going to depress you, and secondly, you can't change it. So rather focus on the things that you control. So I think we'll be continuing with that. I guess as I kind of, enter, the 40s, stage of my life where, I've now got, a young family, and, just really focusing on my family is what is a huge priority to me. And also having fun, man. Like I think in life, life is short. And I really do live by the adage that, you know, we've got, this is not a dress rehearsal. And I really just do what I'm passionate about, you know, and have fun and travel and go see things and do things that I really enjoy and my family enjoy. And just try not to take things too seriously.
For sure. No, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and for joining. It was very interesting to pick your brain on some things.
Great.
And hopefully have you back once again.
Cool, man. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Sure.